the book of Alcoholics Anonymous, they talk about one of the founders, Bill Wilson, what they called like a white light experience.
White light experience, yeah.
I had one in that church that day.
Okay, because not everybody has those, but...
No, not many.
Yeah.
I was in tears. The whole room just lit up. Yeah, it was pretty scary, actually. At first, I didn't know what was happening.
When people go through addiction and they hit whatever their bottom is, and then they do finally truly surrender and embrace recovery and decide to embark on the resurrection portion of this, they have this spiritual awakening. It is so common. What's going on, everyone? You are back on the Sober Awakening podcast. I am the host, Tim Lyons, the president, CEO, and founder of Sober Awakening. I am joined today by my new friend, Paul Booth. Paul, and I'm going to use my readers here for the first time. I've been at 52. I've been avoiding these things, but they're just, once you get them going, you just can't stop. I never knew what I was missing, I guess. But anyway, Paul Booth is an author, a licensed psychotherapist, and nationally and internationally certified master addiction counselor with nearly 4 decades of experience in addiction treatment, recovery, and family counseling. He has developed and managed prominent recovery programs, supervised and trained addiction counselors, taught at the university level, facilitated men's and women's recovery groups, and provided therapy to individuals, couples, and families. His memoir, Ethos, Pathos, and Alcohol, explores childhood trauma, addiction, recovery, faith, and redemption with emotional honesty and dark humor, which I very much appreciate. Paul also writes personal essays and short stories about relationships, loss, aging, and beginning again. A frequent podcast guest and public reader, he lives in, and I've never seen this one before. I'm going to take a guess. Okay, I've never seen, it's California. Ojai. I want to say Ouija, but that's not it.
It's Ojai.
Ojai?
Yeah, it's I believe it's a Native American.
Ojai. Okay, that sounds almost like, that almost sounds like Hawaiian or something. Now, most of the time when we're talking about California, I see a lot of Latin American names, but I'm looking at this, Ojai, California, and he lives there with his cat, and again,
which is
Pura.
Hawaiian.
Okay, Pura. All
Pura
right.
Is Hawaiian for flower.
Okay. Hawaiian for flower. All right. Well, Paul, thank you for being with us today. That's quite a colorful background. I'm excited to have this chat. You found me on a podcasting matchmaker.com or Matchmaker FM platform. And I looked into your background. You have a story that is fascinating and I think would be of interest to a lot of the people who are tuning in to view or listen to the Sober Awakening podcast. Before we got on together, I gave you a brief kind of rundown of what I do with Sober Awakening and kind of my backstory. So where do we start with Paul? Like I told you, I come from a background of hardcore alcohol addiction, hitting my rock bottom when I was 42, and then kind of my recovery process and my spiritual direction that I've taken after that. But how about you, Paul? So where does it start?
Well, where it starts, basically, my book lays out, it's called a braided memoir, and it talks about what it was like in my childhood, and it's interwoven with the early recovery days that I have. It's kind of like, this is what happened and this is the result. And it'll kind of work up to where my drinking is, but I came from an alcoholic family, and there was a lot of different types of abuse in my family. And as a result of my mother's drinking, we ended up in a place called McLaren Hall. And in this hall, it's kind of like a juvenile hall, but for non-criminal kids.
McLaren Hall.
McLaren Hall. I believe it's been closed down because they overcrowded it or something like that years ago. It was a long time ago that I was there. And I spent the summer there. And one of the most probably prominent points that I remember in my life was being called into a courtroom and being asked when I had just turned 12 years old, which parent that I thought we should live with. Today, you wouldn't ask a kid something like that. All I can remember was probably crying for quite a while before I answered my mother, because I'm the oldest of 4 children, and my sister was still in a crib. And even though my mother, I knew she was going to keep drinking, she promised she wouldn't. I didn't believe her, but She had a crib, and I figured a toddler needed to be with her mother. She's not even a toddler yet.
So at
But
12 years old, you were
at 12
conscious
years
of
old,
your.
yeah, it was one of the
Mm.
worst decisions I've made in my life too.
Well, that's a lot
Yep.
to put on a 12-year-old.
Yeah, that's why I remember so clearly. So we were released to my mother's custody, and it wasn't long before she was drinking, if she had ever stopped at all, but it was out of control very quickly. And my siblings went to stay with my father, and I stayed with my mother, being the oldest, thinking that I would take care of my mother. But it got so bad that I couldn't stay there. She almost burned the house down. There were several things that happened until it just got so bad. My father picked me up, and I went to stay with him. So I'm with him thinking that he doesn't want me because of what I had said in court. Now, this was not true. I had all made it up in my head. But I figured I wasn't wanted there, so I was very lonely and unhappy in the house. And it wasn't there more than maybe a couple of weeks. But we got a phone call in the middle of the night. And my father, back then they had the phone that was on the wall with a long cord. So it couldn't stay on the phone. You had to go into the closet and talk in the
Yeah,
bathroom.
yeah.
And anyway, he got there first. It was early, maybe 2 a.m. He said thank you, and he hung up. And he saw me standing there and in our underwear, and he looks at me and he goes, "Your mother's dead. Go back to bed." That was it. I went back to bed, and I waited in there thinking he'd come in and talk to me. He never did. We never did talk about it that day. So that just reinforced all the beliefs that I had, negatively, that I was in the wrong place, that it wasn't wanted, that nobody cared what was happening to me. Now, I believe that this all leads up to one of the things is my father owned a soda fountain, which was very popular in the late 50s and early 60s downtown Los Angeles. Because they were more like a general store. It was a regular soda fountain, but also they sold liquor and they had prescriptions and they had, just general merchandise also. And I would work that store. I loved it as a child to work it on weekends. I wanted to spend time with my father. But it was also, I'm surrounded by a jukebox, comic books, and candy. I mean, what more could I want? Ice cream. So
How old were you, Paul, at the time?
12, about 12, 13 years old now.
Okay, so 12, 13. So I was going to say, what more could you want? Probably some, attention from girls at that age yet, maybe.
I think I was so depressed still at that point. It really wasn't on my mind a whole lot anyway. Remember, what I do remember was that I couldn't sleep at night. I was just worried all the time and felt guilty about my mother. I stole a bottle of Cutty Sark scotch. And you go, what the world would a child want to drink scotch for? One of the worst things it would taste. What it was it had a yellow label with a sailboat on the bottle. So that's what I saw. And I stole that bottle and I put it under my mattress. And at night, I would take a couple of sips of it and I would be able to fall asleep. Even though I swore I'd never be like my mother, all of a sudden I found that was the answer. I was able to go to sleep. And I began drinking every night in that way. I didn't start at parties and socially or anything. I started in my room all by myself under the covers, drinking to go to sleep. I left home at a very early age. My father was really a nice man, but he was not really, he wasn't there for us. He was working all the time. He had hired somebody to do our laundry and the cooking and somebody there to take care of all that. But other than that, he wasn't available. So I had no curfew. I was raised like a wolf, or, a coyote. I just went and came when I wanted. Nobody asked. I remember I ran away once and nobody came looking for me. I don't think they missed me because it was like I was gone all the time anyway. See, so I moved out of the house. I was on my own. My father actually helped me with the rent when I was 16 years old. I was living in a place in Los Angeles called Atwater. It was a little 2-bedroom house owned by the hospital, $60 a month for a 2-bedroom. So I had a roommate, and all we did was, we went to school, but we drank every day. And now I'm getting thrown out of school. I already was getting thrown out of school. Even though I had good grades, I wouldn't get a haircut. Back then, you had to have, they had a lot of rules about your hair. Couldn't wear tennis shoes in the hallways only during gym. You had to have your shirt tucked in. They had a lot of really strict rules in public schools. People nowadays don't believe it was like that. It was. So they would not let me graduate on the stage, and they wouldn't let me play sports because I wouldn't get a haircut. So eventually I was asked to leave school for inciting a riot, which I didn't do, but I happened to be in the area. And so I left school and I joined a city college at night. They didn't didn't need any type of credentials. So I went to City College at night. I could go barefooted and shorts, and I could smoke, and I got straight A's. And I did a
Okay.
couple of evenings in junior college, and then I got into college full time. I didn't need a diploma, so I never did graduate high school. But I managed to go through the rest of my life going to school and ended up with a master's degree. So,
Yeah.
ever getting a high school diploma. During those times, though, I was living with my cousin and I would live with friends, and the drinking was getting worse. And I was born and raised in Hollywood. And this was during the 60s and early 70s. And it was quite the place to be for a teenager. If you're a parent of a teenager, it was the worst place to be. But for
Yeah.
the teenager himself, it was the greatest. And we had the magic bus, we had the love-ins, we had the music everywhere, and we had the drugs everywhere.
Hmm.
And then I was soon very heavy into all types of drugs. And I'll skip a lot of that because I went to my first AA meeting when I was 18 years old. I already knew that I had a problem, but I had a girlfriend that insisted I stop drinking. Well, I went to one meeting and I came back and I told her some story and that was fine. But eventually it came down to her or I had to stop drinking. And so she had to go. And
Right.
I kept drinking. My father died and I tried to run his business. And I ended up in debt because he didn't have anything, no estate planning, nothing left at all. But he had a business that I thought I could run.
Mm.
And I tried to because I had siblings that were still living to take care of them. And there's some stories about what happened when he died. He died in Mexico and he had some legal drugs in his car, which I stole all the time. They were prescription drugs for him. And there's quite a story how I drove down on Christmas Eve, get these drugs out of the car before I claimed his body. I was just so much strung out on drugs. That's all I thought about. And after he died, I couldn't run his business. I ended up spending the night in a psychiatric hospital because I was working day and night. I was taking methamphetamine to work all day, and then I would drink myself to sleep every night.
Yeah.
And if you do that day after day, eventually it takes a toll on you.
Yeah.
I flipped out and they took me to a psych hospital and they put me on a hold, but they let me go the next day. When I came to, I was handcuffed to a chair next to a guy who was also handcuffed to a chair, but he had just run his family down with a station wagon and he killed both of them. And when I heard this story, I went, oh boy, I sobered up real quick. I had to get out of here. I didn't know what I got into. So I got out there and they put me into an outpatient program for psychiatric help for grieving. But I kept drinking and I pretty much turned that group session into a love-in. I'd ride my motorcycle down. Now I'm into motorcycles and all I'm riding for years is motorcycles. I'd get fruit baskets, things like that and take it to group therapy. And I really enjoyed group therapy, but I never dealt with anything.
Hmm.
And over time, living in the Hollywood Hills, my drinking got worse until it got so bad. I had an experience where I tried to take antabuse or disulfiram, which is a drug that you take when you drink it. It makes alcohol toxic in your system.
Yeah. You don't feel good. So it's kind of like a deterrent. Yeah.
It's more than yeah, you're going to die.
Okay.
Your heart's going to explode. Your head's going to explode. It's like you'll never forget it. And I ended up being poisoned, but with it by a girlfriend. By the way, there's a story behind that too. A lot of these are in the book.
Yeah, I have a feeling there's a lot in your book that people are going to
Yeah,
might want to pick it up and read about some of this because I'm already hearing a lot of different directions I'd love to go, but we just don't have the time.
that's why I'm skipping over a lot of them because there
Yeah,
are stories behind all these
I
things.
bet.
And so I tried taking antabuse. That didn't work. So a friend of mine who I had happened to be hanging in the streets with, we got in a fight. He was actually blinded in a fight and had his eyes repaired a couple of times for a detached retina, and then they could no longer repair it. We kept drinking and he kept fighting or running into telephone poles. And finally he was blind and he got sober. So now he had to be sober and learn how to be blind at the same time. So he had a couple of years sobriety and I went to stay with him and we went to AA meetings and NA meetings and I stayed sober about 5.5 months. The program that he was teaching me is we go to meetings, we lift weights, we eat vegetables. But after a while, that really wasn't a program I was too interested in. I
Right.
don't remember a whole lot about the program, except I didn't like lifting the weights, eating the vegetables all the time. So I started drinking again. We talk about, often when you start drinking again, it doesn't always pick up where you left off. Sometimes it starts as if you had never stopped, progressed, even when you've stopped drinking. So my drinking was worse than ever in a very short period of time.
Yeah.
I had put my life together in that 5.5 months. I got a job. I was selling books on Hollywood Boulevard. I moved in with a girlfriend that I met. But in a matter of 2 days, I think I lost the job. I wrecked her car. She threw me out of the house. It was just, that's how quickly the drinking took off. But I think what's important about that is that I had a lot of anxiety. And I think many people do when they stop drinking. Anxiety and depression is common. Almost most people that I see when they stop drinking. But I
Yeah.
had no way of managing anxiety. So I started taking these over the counter things. They were like Sominex, but they were for the daytime to keep you alert. Now, this probably is caffeine. So I was taking a couple of them, and then I was taking a bottle of them to stay awake at this bookstore. And then I assumed, I had to take the edge off this anxiety. Well, if that's as much money as I'm spending on this pills, they used to have these little 20 cans of Coors and Olympia. They were really small beer cans. I
Hmm.
said, just one of these cans would be pretty safe, and it would probably be just enough to take the edge off. And so I bought one of those. And within a couple of days, I bought a case of those. One wasn't enough. Freaking a case of little cans. Like none of this makes sense when you're in this insanity. And that's what got me back drinking again. So the drinking went on. The next years, I had motorcycle accidents, a few motorcycle accidents, 5 DUIs. My drinking, it was severe. My life was a mess. I still managed to stay in school, but that was about the only thing I had going for me. So at the age of 32, the last accident that I had involved hitting cars in a police car and going to jail. And when I got out, I was now psychotic from using methamphetamine, and people were after me in my mind. I was paranoid, and I ended up living in the streets for months, sleeping in garages in parks, back of houses. Yeah, it was quite an experience in my life. We're hitting the bottom. And something happened at one point. I went to work for a man who allowed me to sleep in his backyard if I promised to go to church with him. This was the oddest thing he could have told me at the time. I'll work with you if I go to church. And he was drinking the way I was. So I really didn't figure out. It didn't make sense to me, but I said, sure. At least I'm off of the street in a safe place. I've got a tent in his backyard where I can run an electrical cord out and listen to a radio and have a light to read by. So that's what I did. And I went to church. And pretty soon I'm working at the church and I'm sweeping the floors for the pastor. I'm typing up the bulletin because I knew how I had some skills. I knew how to type. So I did the church bulletin. And I wanted to get away from this guy where I was sleeping in his backyard. So I'm spending more and more time at the church. And then I started going to his sermons more frequently. And then one Sunday, I broke down. I cannot explain. In the book of Alcoholics Anonymous, they talk about one of the founders, Bill Wilson, what they called like a white light
White
experience.
light experience. Yeah.
I had one in that church that day.
Okay. Because not everybody has those, but
No, not many.
yeah.
I was in tears. The whole room just lit up. Yeah, it was pretty scary, actually. At first, I didn't know what was happening. And when the light dissipated, the pastor had seen something that happened to me. I guess he saw me, sobbing on the floor. And he talked to me and he asked me if I would get baptized. I agreed, sure. Whatever, after the experience I've just had, yeah, I'll be there next Sunday. Well, I walked out of the church knowing something had changed. I don't know what it was, but I knew something had changed in me. And I can't say anything happened right away, but the one thing I will tell you is I did get baptized the next Sunday, but I took mushrooms to get baptized, thinking I'd have a greater spiritual experience.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm still thinking like a drug addict, but I did get baptized, and I don't know what, but he helped me and talked me into getting into a really low bottom recovery house. I went back to AA, and some people told me about the house. And I got into a really low, it was $60 a month, room and board. Tried finding a place like that. That place saved my life. And I was there 5.5 months and on my own, and got a job, put my life back together, and started exploring. First, as I got my life back together, got the apartments. I moved out of the recovery home. I got a bachelor apartment, then a single apartment, then a one-bedroom apartment, and I just slowly put my life together. And at the same time, I went back to school to become a counselor. And I got better. I took one job after another. Each one got a little better, paid a little more, because at the time, an alcohol and drug counselor wouldn't even pay your rent. It was really, like minimum wage almost.
Well, that's too bad.
But it has improved somewhat, but I can't say a whole lot.
No.
But I did get a break because of my education, because I had stayed in school. Besides the certification in the alcohol and drugs, I got employed at a popular hospital that had a treatment center, a big hospital, St. John's Hospital in Santa Monica. It was kind of like the West Coast equivalent of kind of like a Betty Ford, so to speak. I felt so fortunate to have this job. Whatever they paid me, it was like 35,000 to me. It was like 500,000 a day, but it was just great. And I started taking one job after another from there, and then I went to work at another treatment center. People started calling me and hiring me, and eventually I saw which way that it was going with insurance. And in the meantime, I'm exploring all types of spiritual avenues besides just the church. I was doing a holotropic breathwork and sweat lodges and anything that came down the line that I believed I would have another, some type of spiritual experience or something that would deepen my spiritual understanding of things. I was a true seeker at that time. People knew this and they invited me to do all types of different spiritual experiences. And I did this and my life got better. My spiritual life got better. I'd say it just, everything in my life improved so much. And um, it got to a point where I saw what was happening with the field, that people were going to have to be licensed to work in the field. So I went back to school again and got a degree where I got licensed as a psychotherapist, as a marriage and family therapist.
Mm-hmm.
I like to work and collect insurance because I knew they had a point where you would have to be able to collect insurance to work at one of these treatment centers. I did. But after a while, I figured I'd do even better on my own. So I went out on my own. I was on private practice for over 35 years. I worked for the Medical Board of California for 10 years. I worked with physicians that had alcohol and drug problems. I currently work with the State Bar of California. I work with a lawyer's assistance program with people that have different types of mental health and alcohol drug programs. I've been with them about 25 now. And so in generally, my life has improved. At a late age, I got married at about 56 and quite unfortunately got divorced this last year, which really broke my heart. But, I'm kind of still in recovery from that. But as a result of that, I doubled down on my spiritual practice.
Yeah.
What I've done was I've now am into a form of Buddhism called Nichiren Buddhism.
Okay.
It's a type of Buddhism. Not everybody knows about that. They know, Zen Buddhism and different types. But I'm what you call a contemplative Christian. I still go to church. I have Jesus in my heart, but I also practice Buddhist practices. I chant twice a day, which I find very invigorating and very calming to me, to be able to chant. And trying to make sense of my world today. I'm going to be 75 next week. I'm going to be 42 years sober first week of September, and I'm still putting my life together. I skipped over some parts. I had a major accident, a mountain bike accident, 5 years ago. And this led to other repercussions, a lot of medical problems, I had open heart surgery in 2010, but I had other surgeries, one of which I almost died from a blocked intestine, which was a result of the medications, I believe. And I developed a disorder called CRPS. And I could go on, but I'm also struggling with a lot of physical ailments at the same time. All of this, the main thing that I've had to turn to is to my spiritual practice. I have sought out different people, different types of modalities to help with my mental health. But the sober community and my spiritual practice have been there the entire time. And that's kind of like the foundation of my life today. And 5 years ago, after I had that accident, I decided I wanted to take up writing. I had been a journalism major in school for a short period of time, and I always liked to write, but I never much, uh, thought much of it. So I started writing short stories, and then finally I put together, and I got the book published. So I've got the book, Ethos, Pathos, and Alcohol. People ask, the title is basically, ethos has to do with our character and our credibility. It's a Greek word. And pathos has to do with our emotions. So if you look at our credibility, our character, and my emotions were destroyed with alcohol. So I call it ethos and pathos and then alcohol.
Got it.
Took a toll on all of it. And everybody I know that's read the story, loved the story. I made it into a lot of short stories, put it together, made it very easy to read, but it's very captivating. And I continue to read stories now and write stories and short stories and submit them to magazines, taking drama classes so I can present them better. When I do public readings, I've got like a new kind of, I wouldn't exactly call it a hobby. I'm actually a published author, so it's actually something that I'm doing now in addition to my therapy practice. Still do telehealth. I work out of my home. I see clients online, and I still run a group of attorneys. So between the two, I still keep pretty busy. And let's see, I think I've covered a lot of territory and left out a lot of stories, but that's the basic story there, Tim.
That is really something. You have, well, first of all, what'd you say, 42 years of sobriety now? Congratulations.
Yes. Yeah.
Almost.
September 4th.
September 4th, 42 years. That is no small accomplishment whatsoever. And your experiences, I could have stopped and asked you to elaborate on so many things in there. And I was just like fighting the temptation to do so because I wanted you to get through everything. And I know that's all covered in your book. But that was really interesting. One of the things that stood out to me is you had an actual white light experience. Now, in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, it talks about those like you said, but most people don't have that happen. I never had anything like
they
that
talk
happen.
about that also. In the back of the book, it says that most people do not have that experience, that they have what they say, spiritual awakening as a result of more of an educational variety. They learn it over time.
Yeah. You know what? I do find though, whether it's a white light experience or like myself, it is so common that when I call it my personal death and resurrection in a way. When people go through addiction and they hit whatever their bottom is, and then they do finally truly surrender and embrace recovery and decide to embark on the resurrection portion of this, they have this spiritual awakening. It is so common where the things they learned maybe as a child, in my case, it was the Roman Catholic Church, which I still love. I mean, I love the tradition. I mean, you can say whatever you want about the Catholics. Lots of people, either you love them or you hate them or whatever, but it's tradition. It's what I knew. I'm still I joke, I call it card carrying member of the Catholic faith. I mean, I still go to mass occasionally and my daughter, we send her to Catholic schools, but I went back there and nothing really was making sense anymore. And I started looking in all these different directions. My path started, I developed, because I drive around for my day job a lot across the state of Illinois, through a lot of cornfields, I started listening to all these accounts of near-death experiences because I wanted to figure out, I know there's something else out there. Without digressing too much, I've shared in other places, I had a spontaneous out-of-body experience when I was a teenager. A lot of people think I might be nuts, but it really happened. And so for me, that was enough to let me know that there is something more to this whole thing. We aren't just the material, Newtonian physical world that we see in front of us. But so I started, listening to all this stuff about near-death experiences. And then that led me down other rabbit holes and spiritual paths. And then I started opening myself up to different, faith-based systems and researching those, like the Hindu tradition or Buddhist philosophy, as you had mentioned. And then I started like I told you before, I got into meditation and fasting and breath work and all this stuff, which has been amazing. You had said after your white light moment, though, that you continue to seek spiritual experiences. Where did you go with that portion of because I count that as part of your recovery. So where did you go with your spiritual seeking after you were finally able to get yourself clean and sober?
Before I answer that, one of the things that I would point out, because many people look right past it, in the 12 steps that we have, the 12th step says, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of working these steps.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
So that is the goal here.
Yeah, you're the first person ever really to point that out in conversation. You're right. A lot of people, including myself, do look right past that, but it is right there. And I've heard it probably 1,000 times now. So
who would really object to that?
No. Yeah. Yeah. So with your spiritual awakening, what kind of path led you? What path did you follow?
I did things like I built sweat lodges with Native Americans in Arizona.
Yeah.
I did, besides the breath work that was real popular, I did something that was called holotropic breath work by Stanislaus Grof. It was a very powerful breathing experience combined with very loud rhythmic music and things like that, which I actually hallucinated and had some very powerful experiences. It took me back to being locked up in McLaren Hall as a result of breathing. It has nothing to do with any type of drugs at all. I'd say different churches that I've gone to. One of the reasons I count my grandmother, I give her credit for that. I used to love to stay at her house during the summer or whenever I could to get out of my house because she was quiet. She cooked. She made a home. She made it comfortable. She made quilts, let me watch TV all night. She took care of me. She mothered me, a mother I didn't have. But she also had me as her spiritual companion. She was exploring things all the time. Since I knew her, she had 8 children. She outlived, I think, all but 1 or 2 of them. And she went to the Mormon church, the Christian church, the Catholic church. I mean, she explored all of them. But we also did I Ching sticks, Ouija boards,
Really?
points. She had me doing all these things. So she got me very interested in the spiritual world.
Yeah.
And I give her credit for that.
Well, that's cool because I like, growing up Catholic, boy, you didn't touch. I mean, you mentioned a Ouija board. Now, I won't dabble in that one because just something in me can't go there. But I remember I got really tempted when I first started experimenting with all this stuff. I got tempted. I went down to this store that we have locally here that sells a lot of just odds and ends of things, and I bought a pendulum, right? And I'm like, well, it's not a Ouija board, but I'm gonna try this thing out, right? And it was cool. I think that all those things are neat, and everybody has their different ideas. What's that?
There's no Christian tradition that would support the Ouija board.
No, I don't think so. And maybe that's why something in me just does not want to mess with the Ouija board. Although, you know what, if you're out there and you do and it works for you, I mean, I come from a place of no judgment whatsoever. But I did start, kind of messing around with some of that stuff just out of curiosity. And so your grandmother, you said, was...
She created the curiosity in me.
Yes, it's. I think curiosity, if it comes from a good place, and you get to a point where you're not afraid of it, I think that's the whole key there. Are you afraid or are you not? If you're not afraid of these things, if you got to a point where you're not afraid and you want to be naturally curious in a playful way that comes from a place of love, it's okay. I think if you're afraid, you better kind of check yourself at the door. But kudos to your grandmother, though, for having that natural curiosity.
I'd also say that it helped very much in my private practice in my work.
Yeah.
Because I'm not afraid to go to very dark places with people either. It's helped me hang in there when maybe perhaps other people became uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But I could hang in there and say, that there's some type of spiritual point to this whole thing. What can we get out of it?
Yeah.
I went to Catholic school also.
Did you? Okay. Yeah. That's I was born cradle Catholic, went to Catholic grade school, high school, did not do undergraduate at a Catholic university, but I went and got a graduate degree afterwards at a Jesuit university. So yeah, we're full on Catholic. My wife, born and raised Catholic, and my daughter actually just finished her graduate degree from also, interestingly enough, a Jesuit university. And she's been the product of Catholic education all the way through. So,
I love the rituals.
oh yeah.
It's beauty. There's so much beauty there.
Yeah, there really is. You know what, though? When you start looking into other belief systems, you know how much criticism the Catholic Church comes under, not because of the sins of the last 100 years, which are well documented, but the rituals and how many people will say, well, the body and blood of Christ, that's really representative of cannibalism. And some of the chanting goes back to pagan origins and things like that. And does it or doesn't it? I don't know. I haven't dove into it too much. One thing I have become very interested in is biblical scholarship.
Mm-hmm.
And starting to really get into the meat and potatoes of the Bible, how it was formed, and then also looking at other things like Gnostic texts or the Apocrypha, in a broader sense, and looking at some of that work. I love the Gospel of Thomas. I love the Gospel of Mary, those type of things as well. I really wish the Gospel of Thomas would have made the Bible. I think there's so much out there. And then you look at some of the Bible as well. And when you start really getting into the scholarship and how much of it actually, and I know this is blasphemous to the hardcore Christians out there, how much of it might have been kind of changed over the years, edited, manipulated. It's very fascinating,
It's all fascinating.
Yeah. So you went to, you were out there in California. I imagine there are spiritual experience opportunities du jour.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I live in Ojai, where I live here. I believe it's Chumash Indian. It means the nest. But this is also the Center for Krishnamurti. He thought Ojai was the spiritual center of the universe. And the Krishnamurti Institute is right up the street here. So
okay.
A lot of the new age people that do it, they're very popular and write the books, have centers out here also.
Okay.
We're full of different types of spiritual experiences if you want them.
Yeah. So Ojai, where is that? If I'm picturing the state of California, where are you?
We are east of Ventura, southeast of Santa Barbara, California. Southeast of Santa Barbara.
Okay. So I'm a complete flatlander in the Midwest here. If I'm thinking of the state of California, I'm thinking San Francisco, Los Angeles, San Diego. Where are you if I'm thinking?
We're about not quite halfway between Los Angeles and San Francisco.
Okay. So is that considered Northern California?
Central California.
Central California. Okay. I actually, like I said, I had an employer up until just the last 6 months who was based in the Los Angeles area, El Segundo. And I did make it out to California for the first time when I was, I think, 28 or 29 with work. And then I wasn't back for a while. But then over the years, I've probably been out there like at least 15 to 20 times, probably now. With the majority of it in the last decade, I've been to all over the Los Angeles area. I've been up to Tahoe, San Francisco, over to Palm Springs. That's just a beautiful state, really. I can see why it's very popular to live there,
If you can afford it.
If you can afford it. And that's another thing. I'm looking at real estate prices out there. And I understand, though, everything's to scale, because we'll have people who do nursing jobs, for instance, at a hospital around here, and they'll make $80,000 a year. Whereas they'll go find a job in California and that $80,000 a year turns into $180,000 a year. And that $300,000 home is now $1 million home, so it's all kind of relative, I think,
Right. 3 years ago, I lived in Tennessee. I know the difference. I had a mansion in Tennessee.
Yeah. Yeah.
Most people say once you move out of California, you can't come back. And I understand it was pretty close. We almost couldn't come back.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I get it. But I don't want to digress too much into the geography of California. But beautiful state, great place for recovery. But I imagine that it's also a pretty dangerous place if you have addiction issues.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
There's even jokes about California sobriety. I mean, you can still smoke marijuana.
Oh yeah, the Cali sober or whatever they call that. Yeah, California sober. You're still
Right.
smoking marijuana, but that just
Yeah,
means you're not drinking. Yeah.
right. We don't really consider that sobriety in the sober world, but
Yeah. So let me ask you this. You were doing sweat lodges and things like that. Tell me a little bit about that, Ty. I haven't had anybody on who's ever talked about sweat lodges and the chanting and everything you were referencing before. What's the theory behind the whole sweat lodge mentality? What's the goal?
let's see. Well, it gets very hot in there and gets very smoky. Most every time I've been in one, I've ended up having to lay on the floor just to be able to breathe.
Hmm.
Supposedly, we have spiritual experiences. Perhaps you see things. I've had a couple of close to hallucinations within there. That it's cleansing when they come out. You feel like a different person. Different people have different experiences in it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not Native American, so I don't think I have the same experiences they have, but I've tried to follow the rituals that they have when they go through them. I'll tell you, here's an interesting story. I was in Arizona, and a friend of mine is a medicine man there. He was in a recovery home with me. And
Okay.
then he got sober, he got in touch with his roots. He went to Arizona and he became an actual medicine man. So we were building a sweat lodge down in the river, cutting the willow branches, doing the whole thing, building. And at the time, I was very much into photography. I said, "Can I document this? I want to photograph the whole thing." And they kind of looked at me and smirked. Yeah, go ahead. You know, so I'm taking rolls of film of them building this sweat lodge and doing the ceremony. Back then, it wasn't digital yet. I had to send the film in. Nothing came out. There was nothing on the film at all. And I think they kind of knew this when I took the photos. Yeah, it was the only roll where nothing came out.
Hmm. Interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
weird things like that happen.
Yeah. What would you say is your favorite spiritual? We've talked about breath work and things like that. What's your favorite method of practice?
I don't know if it's a favorite. There's different. Some are more powerful than others, and some are just. I have had gospel music in a regular Christian church that
Mm,
have moved me so much that I was dancing with Jesus in the aisle.
okay.
And I closed my eyes and I was dancing with Jesus. And I was just
Yeah.
listening to the gospel music in the church. The holotropic breath work it was like a Peter Max movie. I might as well, I felt like I had taken very heavy, psychedelic drugs, and I didn't. It was just from breathing it.
So that's holotropic breath work.
Tropic, HOLO, tropic. Yeah,
Tropic.
holotropic.
That's what I wrote down. Breath work.
Stanislav Stroff was the creator of it.
Okay. I'm going to look into that because I actually incorporate breath work into my meditation every morning. And I just do a couple rounds of breath of fire, if you're familiar with,
Yes.
yeah, breath of fire, and then some really, really forced exhalations and inhalations, a few rounds. And then I get to a point where you just pause and you do the breath hold. And it is like you're literally getting high for about 30 seconds. So I know what you're talking about. After I do a few rounds of that, of course, it dissipates and it feels very nice and relaxing, but I can really get into a very, very nice meditative state after that.
Yeah.
It's great. And that isn't even very intensive breath work whatsoever.
This was very intense. And
Yeah.
in fact, and then when I came, I imagine coming through a birth canal.
Uh-huh.
I ended up hitting this bed in McLaren Hall, this a metal bed like an army cot. And I felt a metal door. I heard a metal door slam shut like that was in the hall. And I was back in McLaren Hall as a child and I started sobbing and I cried. But there was another point where there was this jungle music and I was jumping from planet to planet with these long legs like Peter Max chasing a jaguar or something with a
Okay.
spear.
Yeah.
And but when I started sobbing, I came out of it. Everybody else was out, had gone to lunch, and I'm still in there with the psychiatrist sobbing, and he's holding me. I don't even know that everybody's gone because I have these blindfolds on. I have no idea how long it was, but it was much longer. Everybody else was like,
Yeah.
so that was a very powerful experience. I used to do the breath work when I lived in Santa Monica every weekend down in Venice Beach. That got to be a regular with me, a regular
Okay.
experience.
I'm thinking about that experience you have with the hallucination. What an amazing trauma release that sounds like.
Yeah, that's what was important. It wasn't that I was chasing a jaguar.
No.
It was I was a child at one of the most impactful times of my life, being taken away from my parents in the middle of the night, not knowing why, and locked up in some place like a jail, and having done nothing wrong. I was in Catholic school, for God's sake.
Right, right. You're a good
I was probably writing about my patron saint that day.
your patron saint. Mine is actually Saint Jude, patron saint of lost causes and hopeless cases, which I have no shortage of identification with that. I
Yes.
was actually born on the feast day of St. Jude, which is October 28th. So that's where that came about. But
Yeah.
again, I digress. So that breath work, though, that's really interesting because you did have that. It's not so much about the hallucination that I want to focus on or I want to impart on anybody who's listening to this. It's the trauma release that it stimulated.
Yes. And it was run by a psychiatrist, by the way.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. So let me ask you this. You've, now on recovery and you've walked down a variety of different spiritual paths. What kind of advice would you give to anybody who finds this podcast or your work? Of course, they can go to your book if they're interested in learning more about you and what you're bringing to the world. But what kind of advice would you have for anybody who might be newly sober and they're just like where I was describing I was when I started this whole spiritual thing. The body starts to heal. You haven't had drugs or alcohol for a while, but you start to spiritually seek. What kind of advice would you give to somebody who might be there?
Probably from what I observed with people, is the difficult part is first opening up to other people, finding people that you trust. Really is sobriety starts with a community. It really does. I mean, there's a lot of things that we do afterwards, but it's so important to belong to a community of people, especially people that understand what you're doing, and to be patient and to don't give up. None of this is going to happen overnight.
Yeah.
If I learned nothing else, it was learning how to be patient.
Yeah.
And I don't know. And I kept praying, and we always talk about don't give up before the miracle.
Yeah.
After a while, you come to understand that we want things to change so quickly. And that's one of the things that we have to get used to. Things don't change that quickly. The things that have happened quickly were a mess.
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting when we read like the promises, and we talk about being amazed before we're halfway through or something like that. I think about that all the time. While we're going through this, we don't always see it. But now that I have, for instance, over 10 years of sobriety behind me, you have 42, I can look back at 10 years though and be like, holy shit, this has been one just gigantic miracle. Look at where I was and look at where I am now. And really 10 years, that's a cosmic blink of an eye, man. It really is. So in that sense, it's like, look at that miracle that just happened. You just had to be patient and you had to allow it. Like when you were talking about earlier, your different living situations. You went from a tent to, a studio to whatever was next, to a 1-bedroom apartment and it just kind of unfolded,
Got what I needed when I needed it. And, as long as I stayed close to the community, I was happy with what I had.
Yeah.
And I got what I needed from them also.
Mm-hmm.
In the beginning, they brought things to my house for me.
Yeah. I think it's amazing how many people, when you surrender and you're genuine and authentic about it, how many people will come out of the woodwork to help you genuinely. They might not be there with $1 million check. They might not be there with the things we egotistically think we need, but they'll be there with the things we really do need when we need them, And I think community is a big thing. I think when I failed originally, as many people do, I tried to quit in my late 30s. And like you were saying, sometimes with drinkers, we quit, but the disease still progresses. I quit. I quote unquote white knuckled it. I was dry drunk. Wasn't doing AA or anything for around a year. I went back and that's when the wheels really came off the bus in the worst way. It's like the addiction never stopped progressing, even though I had taken a break from drinking, and I wasn't doing anything to embrace community or doing any of the work. I just thought stopping the booze was enough, but it really wasn't. And I learned that the hard way, as most of us do.
And I think big reason for that is underneath it, we don't recognize how much shame we have.
Yeah.
Even the shame, we should be able to do it ourselves. We even have shame about that, let alone
Yeah.
been raised to fix it ourselves.
Yeah. And that's the one thing that I have learned, and I tell people because I'm very public about this now. I have a day job in corporate America. I'm very open about my sobriety. And admittedly, I wasn't for the first several years until I felt confident about having a good foothold in it. I needed to have that confidence. I needed my wife to be okay with me going out and sharing my message with the world. But the more and more authentically I do that, and the more honest I am, and the more I have the courage to get through and not carry that shame, I realize how much carrying that shame in the first place was not necessary. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it runs pretty deep.
Oh, it does. It does. It does. And there are people who will go their whole lives. And that's why, the anonymity surrounding Alcoholics Anonymous is so important, because it is there. Because there are people who will go 40 plus years into sobriety and they still don't want people to know that they ever had a drinking issue, or they will say they still have a drinking issue. They are still alcoholics. That's all they'll ever be. And that's how they like to address it, but it keeps them from drinking. So,
or they don't want to work certain steps because they know they're going to have to talk to somebody about these things.
There's that too.
But even that, if you're patient and do it when you can work up to a place of being comfortable and trusting people. That's why I say I have to build the community first.
Mm-hmm.
But then there comes a point, I think, where you want to get it out. You want to share it with somebody.
Yeah.
Because the more we do, we realize that everybody else has done the same thing.
Yeah.
Worst things I thought could possibly happen. Some guy, I took him everything. I was glad he didn't start laughing at me because that's it,
Right. Right. Yeah. It's amazing when we just let go how much easier it becomes, and all the things we were afraid about. A lot of them we never had to be afraid of in the first place. But anyway, Paul, we are coming up on an hour here.
Really?
Yeah, we are. I'm looking at my timer there. We're at 55 minutes. And so with that in mind, I'd like to give you the opportunity to leave my audience with whatever you would like to leave them with. And also tell us a little bit more about where people can find you and your work if they would like to.
Okay. Well, you learn a lot about me really from reading the book. I'm not just pressing the book. There's a lot about me. And the second half of the book is all about the experiences of my recovery and what I went through and miracles that happened in recovery. I have a website. It's called Paul Booth Stories, which basically not only has the link to the book, which is on Amazon, but it also has short stories that I write them. I start to put them up online for people. Stories also. I'm still in private practice in California, and you can look up, I'm pretty high on the Google list there because I've been on it for a long time. So just a length of time. So you just look up my name, you'll find my number, my address. But Paul Booth Stories is the main website that has a lot of information about me.
Okay. Great.
Just don't try to, you're going to try it anyway. Everybody tries it alone. I don't know of anybody that hasn't tried it alone. So I'm not going to say don't try it alone. Just don't kill yourself in the meantime. Yeah. And eventually realize that maybe it's not working. I might want to do it different. There's a lot of people out there to love you, whether you're ready for it or not. Yeah.
That's so well said. There are a lot of people out there who love you, whether you are ready for it or not. And, the further I get into this whole sobriety thing, the one thing that becomes harder, I'm past the regrets or the making amends for anything I did. But the one thing I regret is now that I look back at the number of people who wanted to love me in my life and I wouldn't allow it. And then that's the part I'm getting to that really sucks.
Can't tell you how many problems that caused in my life by keeping people out of my life that love me.
I know so many missed opportunities and things and people who just wanted to bring so many good things and miracles and blessings to you. And because of your addiction or your drinking, you just, not that you didn't want it or you didn't even know you didn't want it, but you just couldn't do it with the person you were then. And that really sucks to look back at sometimes. So yeah. Yeah. All right. But hell, we're all sober now and we're all working through it together. And we have the communities we belong to and the broader community that we all are a part of. And so, yeah. So anyway, thank you, Paul. Is that, do you think that covers it?
Thank you for having me on the show.
Yeah, no, appreciate it. I think there's a lot of good stuff here. And again, congratulations on this tremendous body of work you've put together. Congratulations on your 41, soon to be 42 years of sobriety. And thank you for blessing us with your presence. And thank you for now being a part of our little sober awakening family, Paul. Very much appreciate it.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
All right. Thank you much. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Sober Awakening podcast. We are so grateful and excited that you're part of this journey. As always, please remember any businesses, services, or individuals mentioned here are shared because they resonate with our mission. We receive no financial benefit from promoting them. It's all about guiding you toward what inspires and empowers your journey. If you've found value in this podcast, please consider supporting our mission with a tax-deductible donation at www.soberawakening.org. Every contribution helps us continue providing resources and inspiration for those seeking sobriety and spiritual fulfillment. Don't forget to subscribe, share this episode, and visit us at soberawakening.org for more resources and upcoming events. Let's continue this path together toward a life of sobriety and spiritual fulfillment. We love you so much. Until next time, stay sober-minded and intuitively guided.